Talk about the age, because you've been, very vocal about, first of all, highlighting that a lot of these cases are older. And obviously there are the comorbidities, and also how we don't seem to discern between a 20-year-old life and an 85-year-old life, and the fact that the marginal gain of keeping an 85-year-old, alive one more year is obviously a significant cost. Can you just talk a little bit more about your thoughts on that?
So it seems to me to be obvious. And what surprised me was that people thought I was being really, really cruel. And I would say to people, okay, so, I'm 73 years old. I'm very aware that I've had 73 great years. I have a 16-year-old grandson. He's out of school. He's in California. His life is being endangered for me. And I kind of often see this thing in terms of the young versus the old. I'm a baby boomer, was born in 47, had it really good. I mean, when I was growing up, everything was opening up, easy to get into college, easy to get a job. We didn't have to compete with the generation above us because they hadn't really made it. And we had the best music. We had, everything was coolest. And we've got to remember that we're no longer, we still think we're the greatest thing on earth. But the fact is that all those young generations are the future. And I think there was a little bit too much emphasis on this. People will say I'm obviously wrong, because a lot of young people, will call me a granny killer. Now, my mother actually lived in London, and she's 105 years old. She's actually fine. I chat to her by Apple FaceTime quite often. But I still think that if we in a society, it is very self-serving for the old to think that they are more important than the young. Insurance companies handle this very well. If I want life insurance, no one will give it to me. They're going to say, at 73, you think we're crazy? Whereas if an 18-year-old wants life insurance, they'll give it to him. Now, no one's going to say, well, gee, this 18-year-old hasn't been to college, he doesn't have a Nobel Prize, we should give it to you. It doesn't work like that. You get a chance to live, you make the best of you can, and then you move on. But quite frankly, people, when I spoke like this and I try to explain to them about indices like years of life lost, YLL, years life lost, or disability allowed life losses. These are things that insurance companies use. All doctors use this. If I went to my doctor and said, okay, I want a heart transplant. Gee, I'm a good guy. Maybe I'd get it at Stanford Medical School, but it wouldn't be fair. Because the fact is that you've got to give people, if you always let people who are older get more, then the young are never going to get a chance. And as a baby boomer, when I was growing up, I had it easy because all the people who were above me had the terrible time of growing up in the Great Depression or the Second World War. So, it isn't fair. But for whatever reason, and I kind of fear that there'll be a backlash, and that at some point the penny is going to drop and the young are going to say, okay, to keep somebody who's 85 alive for an extra 6 months, you've basically put me into a financial situation where I can't buy a house, my business has failed, I'm not going to be able to afford healthcare for my kids. In other words, and it's not fair. So, but I still don't understand, you could argue maybe it happened because most politicians are baby boomers, or maybe the media was spinning the story. It was very prevalent, especially in Israel, where, no one dared to talk about the things I've just said to you about years of life lost, or that perhaps, a soldier killed in the line of duty at the age of 20 is more than somebody who's lived a very full life dying from corona, because everyone dies from something. Dying naturally of old age, nobody dies naturally of old age. And even if you die in your sleep, it might be a stroke, it might be a heart attack. So, everyone dies of something. And just because you die with a little sticker on you saying COVID, that gets you onto the front page of the New York Times, whereas in the same period, another 600,000 people died in the USA from exactly the same age group, but they didn't die of COVID. So they didn't get memorialized. Now, if they had been, soldiers in any of the wars, that's special. These are the people who have really given their lives. But, no one who died of COVID really, and I think the hospital staff are different. Medical service people did give their lives to COVID, and they're the heroes. But they wouldn't cover the front page of the New York Times. There might be 500 of them at the most. So I think there's a lot of, I would say dishonesty almost. I really don't believe that people really believe this. Although I must say, I'm very active on Twitter now, which I love. My Facebook friends, many of whom aren't my Facebook friends anymore, would not buy this. They felt that death was death, and it didn't matter how old you were. So